Maya Chen grew up in a small apartment building in the poorest neighborhood of Chicago. The walls were thin, the hallways smelled of old cooking, and the sounds of arguments and crying babies filled the air every single night. Her mother worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on, and her father had left when Maya was only 3 years old. She had no memory of him, except for an old photograph her mother kept hidden in a drawer. The apartment building had one thing that made it special. In the basement, covered in dust and forgotten by everyone, there sat an old piano. It was broken in many places. Some keys did not work at all. The black and white paint had faded to a sad gray color. But to young Maya, who was only 6 years old when she first discovered it, that piano was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen in her entire life. She would sneak down to the basement every day after school while her mother was still at work. She would sit on the broken wooden bench and press the keys one by one. At first, she made only noise, terrible, ugly sounds that echoed off the concrete walls. But something inside her told her to keep going. Something told her that this instrument was meant for her hands. Weeks turned into months. Months turned into years. Maya taught herself to play by listening to music on an old radio her mother had. She would hear a song and then try to copy it on the piano. Her fingers would make mistakes again and again. But she never stopped. She never gave up. Even when her fingers hurt so badly that she wanted to cry, she kept playing. Even when other kids laughed at her for spending all her time in a dirty basement, she kept playing. By the time Maya was 12 years old, something magical had happened. The sounds coming from the basement were no longer ugly noise. They were music, real, beautiful music, that floated up through the floors and touched the hearts of everyone who heard it. Neighbors would stop in the hallway and listen. Some would even come down to the basement just to watch this small girl create something so wonderful from an instrument that everyone else had thrown away and forgotten. Her mother finally heard her play one evening after coming home early from her shift at the hospital. She stood at the basement door with tears streaming down her face. She had no idea her daughter had this gift. She had no idea that all those hours Maya spent alone were being used to create something so incredible. That night, she held Maya tight and whispered that she would find a way to get her real lessons, no matter what it cost. But real piano lessons cost money that they simply did not have. Maya's mother tried everything. She worked extra shifts. She sold things they could barely afford to lose. She even asked family members for help. But the answer was always the same. They were too poor. They could not afford such a luxury. Music lessons were for rich people, not for people like them who struggled just to survive each day. Maya understood. She was young, but she was wise beyond her years. She had learned early that life was not fair. She had learned that some people got everything, while others got nothing. But she refused to let this stop her. If she could not have real lessons, she would teach herself. She would work harder than anyone else. She would prove that talent and determination could overcome any obstacle that stood in her way. She started watching videos at the public library. She would spend hours studying the hand movements of famous pianists. She would write down notes and practice them over and over again in the basement. She read every book about music theory that she could find. She memorized the names of composers and studied their lives. She learned about Beethoven, who created his greatest works even after he went deaf. She learned about Mozart, who was called a genius but still practiced for hours every single day. These stories inspired her. They told her that greatness was not given to people. It was earned through struggle and sacrifice. It was earned through thousands of hours of practice when no one was watching. It was earned through believing in yourself when the whole world told you to give up and accept your place in life. When Maya was 15, a new music teacher arrived at her public school. His name was Mr. James Williams, and he was different from anyone Maya had ever met. He was a tall man with kind eyes and silver hair that made him look wise and gentle. He had once played piano in famous concert halls across the world, but now he dedicated his life to teaching young people who could not afford private lessons. On his first day, Mr. Williams asked if any students played an instrument. Most of the class stayed silent. They were embarrassed or uninterested, but Maya raised her hand slowly, her heart beating fast with nervousness. He asked her to stay after class. When they were alone, Mr. Williams asked Maya to tell him about herself. She shared her story with hesitation at first, then with growing confidence. She told him about the basement piano. She told him about teaching herself. She told him about all the hours she had spent alone, dreaming of a life where music could be her whole world. Mr. Williams listened without interruption. When she finished, he simply asked her to play something for him. Maya's hands trembled as she walked to the old classroom piano. It was much better than her basement instrument, but still far from perfect. She took a deep breath and began to play. The piece she chose was one she had learned by herself. It was complex and challenging. It required skills that most people took years of professional training to develop. But Maya played it with her whole soul. She closed her eyes and let the music flow through her like water through a river. Every note was filled with emotion. Every chord told a story of struggle and hope and dreams that refused to die. When she finished, there was complete silence in the room. She opened her eyes and looked at Mr. Williams. He was sitting very still, with his mouth slightly open. Tears were forming in the corners of his eyes. For a long moment, he said nothing at all. Then he spoke 3 words that would change Maya's life forever. He said, "You have something special." He told her that in all his years of teaching and performing, he had rarely seen raw talent like hers. He said that with proper training, she could become one of the great pianists of her generation. And he offered to teach her himself, completely free of charge, for as long as she was willing to learn. Maya could not believe what she was hearing. She thought she must be dreaming. Things like this did not happen to girls from her neighborhood. Things like this only happened in movies and fairy tales. But Mr. Williams was serious. He saw something in her that deserved to be nurtured and protected. He saw a diamond hiding in the rough, waiting to shine. That day marked the beginning of a new chapter in Maya's life. She did not know yet how difficult the road ahead would be. She did not know about the challenges and heartbreaks that were waiting for her. But she knew one thing for certain. She had been given a chance, and she would not waste it. She would work harder than she had ever worked before. She would make Mr. Williams proud. She would make her mother proud. And most importantly, she would prove to herself that her dreams were worth fighting for. The lessons with Mr. Williams began the following week. Every Tuesday and Thursday after school, Maya would walk to his small apartment on the other side of town. It took her 45 minutes each way. But she never complained. She could have taken the bus, but she preferred to save those coins for her mother. Walking gave her time to think about music and practice fingering exercises in the air. Mr. Williams had a beautiful grand piano in his living room. It was the most magnificent instrument Maya had ever touched. The keys were smooth and perfect. Every note rang out clear and true. She was almost afraid to play it at first. She felt like her fingers were not worthy of such an instrument after years of practicing on her broken basement piano. But Mr. Williams encouraged her gently. He told her that the piano was just a tool. The real music came from inside the person playing it. The instrument did not make the artist. The artist brought life to the instrument. These words stayed with Maya forever. They taught her that her value did not come from expensive things. Her value came from the passion and dedication she carried in her heart. The training was harder than anything Maya had expected. Mr. Williams pushed her beyond her limits every single session. He made her play the same passage 100 times until it was absolutely perfect. He corrected her posture, her hand position, her breathing, her facial expressions. He taught her that playing piano was not just about pressing keys. It was about telling a story with every movement of her body. There were days when Maya wanted to give up. Her fingers ached constantly. Her back hurt from sitting straight for hours. Her eyes burned from reading sheet music until late at night. Sometimes she would go home and cry into her pillow, wondering if she was foolish to dream so big, wondering if people like her were simply not meant for greatness. But every time she thought about quitting, she remembered her mother. She remembered all those extra shifts at the hospital. She remembered the tired look in her mother's eyes every night. She remembered the sacrifices that had been made just so she could have food and shelter. How could she give up when her mother never did? How could she quit when her mother worked so hard every single day without complaint? So Maya kept going. She practiced until her fingers bled. She studied until her mind felt like it would explode. She pushed herself further than she ever thought possible. And slowly, bit by bit, she began to transform from a talented girl into a true musician. Mr. Williams noticed the change. After 6 months of training, he told Maya that she had improved more than most students do in 5 years. Her technique was becoming polished and professional. Her emotional expression was deepening and maturing. She was no longer just playing notes on a page. She was interpreting music and making it her own. When Maya turned 17, Mr. Williams told her about a state piano competition. It was held every year at a prestigious concert hall downtown. Students from all over Illinois would compete for scholarships and recognition. The winners often went on to study at the best music schools in the country. Some even launched professional careers. Maya was terrified. She had never performed in front of strangers before. The thought of standing on a real stage, with judges watching her every move, made her feel sick with fear. What if she made a mistake? What if she embarrassed herself and Mr. Williams? What if everyone laughed at the poor girl from the bad neighborhood who thought she could compete with students who had been trained since birth? But Mr. Williams believed in her. He told her that fear was natural and even healthy. Every great performer felt nervous before going on stage. The difference between winners and losers was not the absence of fear. It was the courage to perform despite the fear. He told her that she had worked too hard to hide in the shadows forever. It was time to show the world what she could do. Maya agreed to enter the competition. The next 3 months became the most intense period of her life. She practiced 8 hours a day, every single day, without rest. She chose a difficult piece by Rachmaninoff that showcased both technical skill and emotional depth. She played it so many times that she heard it in her dreams. She could feel the music flowing through her veins like blood. Her mother watched with worry and pride. She saw her daughter push herself to exhaustion. She saw the dark circles under Maya's eyes. She saw the bandages on her fingers from practicing so hard. Part of her wanted to tell Maya to slow down, to take care of herself. But she knew her daughter better than anyone. She knew that Maya needed to do this. She needed to prove something to herself and to the world. The competition arrived on a cold November morning. Maya and her mother took a bus downtown to the concert hall. Maya had never seen a building so beautiful. The walls were decorated with golden designs. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls. Hundreds of people filled the elegant seats, waiting to hear the young performers. Maya looked around at the other contestants. They all seemed so confident and polished. They wore expensive clothes and carried themselves with an air of privilege. Their parents stood nearby, speaking to each other in refined tones about private lessons and summer programs in Europe. Maya felt completely out of place in her simple dress that her mother had bought secondhand. A girl about her age walked up to her with a smile that was not friendly at all. Her name was Victoria, and her father was a wealthy businessman who funded half the arts programs in the city. Victoria looked Maya up and down with obvious judgment in her eyes. She asked Maya where she studied. Maya answered honestly that she learned from a retired teacher who gave free lessons. Victoria laughed and said that was sweet, like someone learning surgery from watching hospital shows. She said the competition was for serious musicians, not charity cases looking for attention. Maya felt her face burn with shame and anger. She wanted to run away and hide. She wanted to disappear into the floor and never be seen again. But then she felt her mother's hand on her shoulder. She looked up and saw her mother's eyes. tired but full of fire and love. Her mother whispered that no one could make her feel small without her permission. She said that Maya had worked harder than anyone in this room. She said that talent did not come from money or fancy schools. It came from the heart. And Maya's heart was bigger than anyone Victoria had ever met. Those words gave Maya strength. She straightened her back and looked Victoria directly in the eyes. She did not say anything. She did not need to. Her response would come from the piano. Her answer would be the music she had prepared for this moment. The hours passed slowly as contestant after contestant performed. Some were good. Some were excellent. Victoria played a technically perfect piece that earned polite applause from the crowd. She walked off stage with a satisfied smile, certain that she had won. Finally, Maya's name was called. She walked to the stage on legs that felt like water. The spotlight hit her face, and she could not see the audience anymore. She could only see the piano, sitting there like an old friend, waiting for her touch. She sat down on the bench and placed her hands on the keys. The room went completely silent. Not a single person moved or breathed loudly. Everyone was watching, waiting to see what this unknown girl would do. Maya closed her eyes and thought about her life. She thought about the basement piano and all those lonely hours of practice. She thought about Mr. Williams and his kindness. She thought about her mother and her endless sacrifice. She thought about every person who had ever told her she was not good enough. And then she began to play. The first notes filled the concert hall like a gentle whisper. Maya started soft and slow, letting the melody float through the air like morning mist over a quiet lake. The audience leaned forward in their seats, drawn in by something they could not quite explain. There was a quality in her playing that felt different from the other performers. It felt alive and real and deeply human. Then the music began to build. Maya's fingers moved faster across the keys, dancing from note to note with grace and power. The soft whisper became a conversation. The conversation became a speech. The speech became a roar. The entire piano seemed to shake with the force of her emotion. People in the audience began to feel things they had not expected. An elderly man in the third row wiped tears from his eyes without knowing why. A young mother held her child tighter, remembering her own dreams that she had put aside long ago. Even the judges, who had heard thousands of performances in their careers, sat frozen with amazement on their faces. Maya was no longer thinking about her fingers or the notes or the competition. She had entered a place where only the music existed. Every pain she had ever felt, every joy she had ever known, every hope she had ever carried, all flowed through her hands and into the instrument. She was not just playing the piano, she was speaking through it. She was telling her story to everyone in that room. The middle section of the piece was the most challenging. It required incredible speed and perfect timing. One mistake would destroy everything. But Maya did not make mistakes. Her thousands of hours of practice had prepared her for this exact moment. Her muscles knew exactly what to do. Her mind was free to focus on the emotion, while her body handled the technical demands. The music grew louder and more intense. It filled every corner of the concert hall. It bounced off the golden walls and the crystal chandeliers. It wrapped around every person like a warm embrace. Some audience members closed their eyes to feel it better. Others could not look away from the small girl on stage who was creating such magic. Then came the final section. The storm of sound began to calm. The roar became a speech again. The speech became a conversation. The conversation became a whisper. Maya's fingers slowed down, each note hanging in the air for a precious moment before fading away. The last note rang out pure and clear. It seemed to hang in the silence forever. Then it faded, and the concert hall was completely still. No one moved. No one breathed. No one knew what to do. They had just witnessed something extraordinary, and they needed a moment to understand what they had experienced. Then a single person began to clap. Then another. Then another. Suddenly, the entire audience was on their feet, applauding with all their strength. The sound was like thunder rolling through the hall. People were shouting and crying and hugging each other. They had come expecting a standard competition. They had received something much more. They had received a gift. Maya sat frozen at the piano, unable to believe what was happening. She had played her best, but she never imagined this response. She finally stood up on shaking legs and bowed to the audience. The applause grew even louder. It went on and on and on, refusing to stop. In the audience, her mother was sobbing openly. She did not care who saw her. Her daughter had just shown the world. The beauty that she had always known existed inside her. All those years of struggle and sacrifice had led to this moment. It was worth everything. It was worth 1,000,000 times. Everything. Mr. Williams sat nearby with a smile on his face and tears in his eyes. He had taught many students over the decades. Some had gone on to successful careers. Some had won prestigious awards. But he had never seen anyone perform quite like Maya. She had something special that could not be taught. She had a connection to music that went beyond skill or training. She had a soul that spoke through her fingers. Victoria stood in the wings backstage, watching with a face that had turned pale. She had been so confident before. She had been so certain that her expensive training and privileged background would guarantee victory. But now she understood that music was not about money or status. It was about truth. And Maya had just shown more truth in 10 minutes than Victoria had shown in her entire life. The judges took a long time to make their decision. They retired to a private room and discussed for over an hour. Everyone waiting outside knew what the outcome should be. But competitions had their own politics. Sometimes, talent was not enough. Sometimes, connections and money influenced the results. When the judges finally emerged, the head judge walked slowly to the microphone. The room fell silent instantly. Everyone held their breath, waiting for the announcement. The judge cleared his throat and began to speak. He said that in his 30 years of judging competitions, he had never had an easier decision. He said that one performer had risen so far above the rest that there was no comparison possible. He said that talent like this appeared once in a generation, maybe once in a lifetime. And then, he called Maya's name as the first place winner. The crowd exploded with cheers. Maya could not move. She felt like she was dreaming. Her mother ran to the stage and pulled her into a crushing hug. They stood there together, crying and laughing, while cameras flashed around them and reporters shouted questions. The prize included a full scholarship to the Chicago Conservatory of Music, one of the best music schools in the Midwest. Maya would receive professional training from world-class teachers. She would have access to the finest instruments and facilities. She would be surrounded by other talented musicians who shared her passion. Everything she had ever dreamed about was suddenly within reach. But even in this moment of triumph, Maya felt something strange. She felt grateful and happy, but she also felt scared. Her life was about to change completely. She would be entering a world she did not understand. A world of wealthy students and high expectations. She would be far from her neighborhood, far from the basement piano that had started everything. That night, after all the celebrations ended, Maya went back to her apartment building. She walked down to the basement one last time. The old piano sat there in the darkness, still broken, still forgotten by everyone else. She ran her fingers over the faded keys and whispered, "A thank you." This instrument had given her everything. It had given her purpose when she had none. It had given her hope when hope seemed impossible. It had been her friend during countless lonely hours. She promised herself that no matter how successful she became, she would never forget where she started. She would never become like Victoria. She would always remember the broken piano in the basement that changed her life. The next morning, a newspaper article appeared with Maya's picture on the front page. The headline read about the unknown girl who had stunned the music world. Reporters called it the most emotional performance the competition had ever seen. They called Maya a rising star, a natural prodigy, a miracle from the streets of Chicago. But Maya knew the truth. There was no miracle. There was only hard work. There was only determination. There was only a girl who refused to let her circumstances define her future. She had earned this victory with blood and sweat and tears. And she was only just beginning. The Chicago Conservatory of Music was nothing like Maya had imagined. The buildings were old and grand, with tall columns and marble floors that echoed with every footstep. Students walked through the halls carrying expensive instruments, speaking casually about summer concerts in Vienna and master classes in Paris. Everyone seemed to know each other already. Everyone seemed to belong. Maya felt like an outsider from the very first day. Her scholarship covered tuition and books, but it did not cover everything else. She could not afford to live on campus, so she took a bus for 2 hours each way from her old apartment. She could not afford new clothes, so she wore the same few outfits over and over while other students showed off designer brands. She could not afford to eat at the cafeteria, so she brought simple lunches that she ate alone in empty practice rooms. The other students noticed her differences immediately. Some were kind and tried to include her in conversations, but most looked at her with curiosity, or pity, or disdain. Whispers followed her through the hallways. She heard them talking about the charity case, the scholarship girl, the lucky one who got in because she made people cry at a competition. The classes were challenging beyond anything Maya had experienced. Her teachers were former concert pianists with impossible standards. They expected perfection in every note, every phrase, every breath. They pushed their students relentlessly, breaking them down and building them back up. Many students cracked under the pressure. Some dropped out within the first semester. Maya's technique, which had seemed so impressive at the competition, was now considered rough and unpolished. Her teachers corrected her constantly. They told her that self-teaching had given her bad habits that would take years to fix. They told her that passion was not enough. She needed precision and control and discipline that only formal training could provide. These criticisms hurt deeply. Maya had worked so hard to reach this point. She had believed that winning the competition proved her worth. Now, she felt like a fraud who had fooled everyone. Maybe Victoria was right. Maybe she was just a charity case pretending to be something she was not. The worst moment came during her second month at the conservatory. She was practicing in a studio when a group of students walked by. She did not know they were listening outside the door. She was playing a difficult passage, struggling with a section that required technique she had never learned properly. She heard laughter through the door. She heard someone say that listening to her was painful. She heard someone else say that the competition judges must have been drunk to choose her as the winner. The words hit her like physical blows. She stopped playing and sat in silence, trying not to cry. That night, Maya seriously considered quitting. She sat in her small room at home and stared at the wall for hours. Every dream she had ever had now felt foolish and impossible. She was 17 years old, exhausted from traveling and studying, surrounded by people who thought she did not belong. What was the point of continuing? Why should she keep fighting when the world clearly did not want her to succeed? Her mother found her sitting in the dark. She did not say anything at first. She simply sat down beside her daughter and held her hand. They stayed like that for a long time, two women who had survived so much together, finding strength in each other's presence. Finally, her mother spoke. She told Maya about her own life, things she had never shared before. She told her about dreams she had when she was young. She had wanted to be a nurse with her own practice. She had wanted to help people and make a difference in the world. But life had other plans. She got pregnant young. She was abandoned by Maya's father. She had to work whatever job she could find just to survive. But she told Maya that she never regretted her choices, because those choices had given her Maya. And watching her daughter chase her dreams was better than any success she could have achieved herself. She said that Maya had already accomplished more than most people do in a lifetime. She said that quitting now would waste everything they had both sacrificed. Then she asked Maya a simple question. Did she still love music? Did she still feel that fire inside her when she sat at a piano? Did she still believe that playing was what she was meant to do? Maya thought about it carefully. Despite all the pain and doubt, the answer was yes. She still loved music more than anything. She still felt alive when her fingers touched the keys. She still believed that she had something to say through her playing. The other students and teachers could criticize her all they wanted. They could not take away the truth in her heart. Her mother smiled and said that was all that mattered. She said that critics would always exist. Doubters would always exist. People who wanted to see others fail would always exist. The only thing Maya could control was her own effort. If she kept working, kept improving, kept believing in herself, eventually the results would speak for themselves. Maya returned to the conservatory with new determination. She stopped caring what other students thought. She stopped comparing herself to people who had every advantage in life. She focused entirely on her own growth, her own journey, her own relationship with music. She woke up at 5 every morning to practice before classes began. She stayed until midnight to practice after classes ended. She recorded herself playing and listened back to find every tiny mistake. She studied videos of great pianists and analyzed their techniques in detail. She asked her teachers for extra help and followed their advice with complete dedication. Slowly, things began to change. Her technique improved dramatically. The rough edges of her playing smoothed out. Her teachers noticed her progress and started treating her with more respect. The same passages that had made students laugh now made them stop and listen with admiration. By the end of her first year, Maya was no longer the struggling scholarship student. She was one of the best pianists in her class. Her name appeared on honor rolls and featured student lists. Professors who had once criticized her now praised her dedication and growth. But more important than external recognition was the change inside Maya. She had learned that success was not about proving doubters wrong. It was not about revenge or showing people who dismissed her. True success was about becoming the best version of herself. It was about staying true to her passion regardless of what others thought. It was about finding joy in the process, not just the results. She had also learned that the conservatory, despite its challenges, had given her exactly what she needed. Her teachers had been hard on her because they saw her potential. They knew that talent without proper training would eventually hit a ceiling. They pushed her because they believed she could handle it. And they were right. Mr. Williams visited her near the end of the year. He sat in the audience while she performed a piece she had been preparing for months. When she finished, he had that same look on his face from when she first played for him in the classroom. Pride, mixed with wonder, mixed with something that looked like hope for the future. He told her that she had surpassed all his expectations. He told her that she was ready for bigger things. And he told her about a national competition that was coming up, one that could launch her into the professional world if she won. Maya listened with a mixture of excitement and fear. She remembered the state competition and how scared she had been. This would be even bigger, even more pressure, even higher stakes. But she also remembered what her mother had said about controlling her own effort. She could not control whether she won or lost. She could only control how hard she worked and how well she prepared. She looked at Mr. Williams and said she would do it. She would enter the national competition. She would give everything she had. And whatever happened, she would be proud of how far she had come. The National Young Artists Piano Competition was held in New York City at Carnegie Hall, the most famous concert venue in America. Musicians from around the world had performed on that stage for over a century. The greatest pianists in history had left their mark there, and now Maya would have the chance to add her name to that legendary tradition. The competition attracted the most talented young pianists from every state in the country. They came from Juilliard and Curtis and Eastman and every prestigious music school that existed. They had studied with the best teachers money could buy. They had performed in venues across the globe. They represented the absolute peak of young classical music talent. Maya traveled to New York with her mother and Mr. Williams. It was her first time leaving Illinois. Her first time seeing a city bigger than Chicago. She stared out the train window at the changing landscape, watching small towns give way to suburbs, and suburbs give way to the endless towers of Manhattan. The city overwhelmed her senses. Everything was loud and fast and enormous. People rushed past on sidewalks without making eye contact. Yellow taxis honked their horns at every intersection. Buildings rose so high that she could not see the sky. She felt tiny and insignificant. A small girl from a poor neighborhood, lost in the greatest city on earth. Carnegie Hall itself took her breath away. The building was beautiful beyond words, with elegant architecture that spoke of history and importance. She walked through the entrance and felt the weight of all the great musicians who had walked there before her. Their spirits seemed to linger in the air, watching to see if she was worthy of standing where they had stood. The competitors gathered for an orientation meeting. Maya looked around at the other pianists and felt her confidence shrink. They all seemed so professional and experienced. They talked about international competitions they had won, famous conductors they had worked with, record labels that were interested in signing them. Maya had nothing to contribute to these conversations. She stayed quiet and tried not to draw attention to herself. One competitor caught her eye. His name was Daniel Park, a 19-year-old prodigy from Los Angeles. He had been called a genius since age 6. He had performed with major orchestras across 4 continents. Critics compared him to the greatest pianists of the 20th century. He was the heavy favorite to win the competition. Daniel noticed Maya watching him and walked over to introduce himself. Unlike the others, he seemed genuinely warm and curious. He asked about her background and listened with interest to her story. He told her that technical training was only part of being a great musician. Heart and soul mattered just as much, maybe even more. He said he was looking forward to hearing her play. Maya appreciated his kindness, but she could not shake her nervousness. The preliminary rounds began the next day, and she barely slept that night. She lay awake in the small hotel room she shared with her mother, staring at the ceiling, running through her pieces in her mind. The preliminaries went well. Maya performed solidly, not her best, but good enough to advance to the semifinals. The judges were impressed by her emotional depth, though they noted some technical issues that prevented a higher score. She had expected this feedback and tried not to let it discourage her. The semifinals were harder. The remaining competitors were all exceptional. Each performance was a masterwork of technique and interpretation. Maya played better than she had in the preliminaries, channeling the pressure into energy instead of fear. She advanced again, this time into the final round of just 5 competitors. Then disaster struck. 2 days before the finals, Maya woke up with pain in her right hand. At first, she thought she had just slept in a bad position. She stretched and massaged the fingers, expecting the discomfort to fade. But it did not fade. It got worse. By midday, she could barely move her fingers without wincing. A doctor confirmed the terrible news. She had developed a stress injury from overuse. The tendons in her hand were inflamed and strained. The doctor said she needed to rest completely for at least 2 weeks. Playing through the pain could cause permanent damage that might end her career. Maya felt her world collapse around her. She had worked so hard to reach this moment. She had sacrificed everything. And now, just when she was so close to her dream, her own body was betraying her. It seemed like the cruelest possible joke. She called Mr. Williams with the news. He was silent for a long moment, then told her that she had a choice to make. She could withdraw from the competition and protect her hand, or she could risk everything by performing through the injury. Neither option was wrong. It was her life and her decision. Her mother sat beside her on the hotel bed, holding her close. She told Maya that no competition was worth destroying her future. There would be other competitions, other opportunities. other chances to shine. Health had to come first. A lifetime of playing was more valuable than one moment of glory. But Maya could not stop thinking about everything she had overcome to reach this point. She thought about the basement piano and the years of lonely practice. She thought about Mr. Williams and his belief in her. She thought about all the people who had said she would never amount to anything. Walking away now felt like proving them right. She went for a long walk through Central Park, trying to clear her mind. The autumn leaves were changing colors, painting the trees in shades of gold and red. Joggers ran past her on the winding paths. Families played with their children on the grass. The city felt peaceful in a way that surprised her. She sat on a bench by a pond and watched the ducks swim in lazy circles. She thought about what music meant to her. It was not about winning competitions or proving doubters wrong. It was about expressing truth, about connecting with something larger than herself, about touching hearts and souls through sound. If she performed with an injured hand, she would not be able to play her best. She would be compromising the very thing she loved. She would be treating the competition as more important than the music itself. And that went against everything she believed. She made her decision. The next morning, Maya went to the competition organizers and officially withdrew from the finals. They were surprised and tried to convince her to reconsider. Other competitors had performed through injuries before. The stakes were too high to give up now. But Maya's mind was made up. The news spread quickly among the other competitors. Some were relieved to face one less rival. Others were genuinely sad to see such a talented pianist withdraw. Daniel sought her out and told her she was making the right choice. He said that protecting her gift was more important than any single victory. Maya watched the finals from the audience with her mother and Mr. Williams beside her. Daniel performed brilliantly and won the competition, just as everyone had predicted. He received a standing ovation that lasted for several minutes. He looked happy but also humble, bowing to the audience with genuine gratitude. After the ceremony, Daniel found Maya in the crowd. He handed her a small piece of paper with his contact information. He told her that when her hand healed, she should reach out. He said he wanted to help her find opportunities in the music world. He said that talent like hers deserved to be heard. Competition results, or no competition results. Maya thanked him with tears in her eyes. She had expected to leave New York feeling defeated and broken. Instead, she felt something unexpected. She felt proud of herself for making a difficult decision. She felt grateful for the kindness of strangers. She felt hopeful that her journey was not over, just delayed. The train ride home was quiet. Maya leaned against the window and watched the landscape pass by in reverse. She thought about all the lessons she had learned. She thought about the importance of patience and long-term thinking. She thought about how success was not always measured by trophies and titles. Her mother squeezed her hand gently and said she was proud of her. Mr. Williams nodded in agreement. They had watched her grow so much in such a short time. They knew that whatever challenges came next, she would face them with courage and wisdom. Maya smiled and closed her eyes. Her hand would heal. New opportunities would come. And when they did, she would be ready. She would be better than ever. She would show the world what she was truly capable of. The months that followed were some of the hardest in Maya's life. Her hand healed slowly, and she was forbidden from playing piano during the recovery. For someone who had practiced every single day for years, the silence was torture. She felt like a part of herself had been cut away and locked in a box. She returned to the conservatory and attended classes, but she could only watch while others played. Her classmates looked at her with sympathy, some genuine, and some secretly satisfied that the rising star had been brought down. The teachers assured her that temporary setbacks were normal in a musician's career, but their words felt hollow when she could not express herself through the instrument she loved. During this difficult time, Maya discovered a new passion. Since she could not play music, she started writing about it. She wrote journal entries about her experiences, her feelings, her observations of other musicians. She wrote about what it meant to love something so deeply that losing it felt like losing a limb. She wrote about the difference between talent and hard work, between natural ability and learned skill. Her writing teacher at the conservatory noticed her journal entries and encouraged her to develop them further. She started writing articles for the school newspaper, reviewing performances and interviewing fellow students. Her unique perspective as both an accomplished performer and a temporarily disabled one gave her insights that other writers lacked. One article in particular gained attention beyond the conservatory walls. Maya wrote about her experience at the national competition, including her decision to withdraw. She wrote honestly about the pressure young musicians faced, the injuries that were often hidden and ignored, the culture that valued winning over health and well-being. She wrote about the courage it took to choose long-term dreams over short-term glory. The article was picked up by a national music magazine. Suddenly, thousands of people were reading Maya's words. Comments poured in from musicians around the world who had faced similar situations. They thanked her for speaking the truth that many were afraid to say. They called her brave and wise beyond her years. Daniel Park read the article and reached out to her as promised. He was impressed not only by her writing but by her character. He invited her to attend a master class he was giving in Boston. He wanted the other students to hear her story and learn from her example. Maya was nervous about appearing at an event without being able to perform. She felt like an imposter, someone who talked about music without actually playing it. But Daniel assured her that her presence would be valuable in other ways. Musicians needed to hear that the industry could be healthier and more humane. They needed role models who prioritized sustainability over burnout. The masterclass was transformative. Maya spoke to a room full of young pianists about her journey, her injury, her recovery process. She told them about the basement piano and Mr. Williams and her mother's sacrifice. She told them about the doubts she had faced and the critics she had overcome. She told them that music was a marathon, not a sprint, and that protecting their bodies was as important as developing their techniques. The students listened with rapt attention. Many approached her afterward with tears in their eyes, thanking her for giving them permission to be human. One young woman said she had been playing through wrist pain for months, afraid to tell anyone. After hearing Maya's story, she decided to finally see a doctor. Maya may have saved her career. Her hand finally healed completely after 4 months. The doctor cleared her to play again, starting slowly and building back up over time. Maya returned to the practice room with a mixture of fear and excitement. What if she had lost her abilities? What if the injury had taken away the gift that defined her identity? She sat at the piano and placed her fingers on the keys. She took a deep breath and played a simple scale. The notes rang out clear and true. Her fingers responded exactly as they should. She played another scale, then another, then a simple melody she had known since childhood. Everything still worked. Everything was still there. Tears streamed down her face as she played. She was crying with relief and gratitude and joy. The music flowed through her once again. That magical connection that made her feel whole. She had been afraid that the silence would last forever. Now she knew that some gifts could not be taken away by time or injury or circumstance. Over the following weeks, Maya rebuilt her technique gradually. She practiced less intensely than before, listening to her body and resting when she needed to. She learned to play smarter, not just harder. She learned that sustainable practice was more valuable than exhausting marathon sessions. Her playing improved in unexpected ways during this period. The forced break had given her perspective. She approached pieces with fresh ears and new insights. She understood now that music was not just about technical perfection. It was about communication, about emotion, about sharing the human experience through sound. 6 months after the national competition, an extraordinary opportunity arrived. A famous orchestra in New York was performing a special concert featuring rising young soloists. One of the scheduled pianists had canceled at the last minute due to a family emergency. The conductor, who had read Maya's article and heard about her from Daniel, reached out to ask if she would be interested in filling the spot. Maya could not believe what she was reading. This was no student competition. This was a professional concert with one of the world's leading orchestras. It would be performed in front of thousands of people and broadcast to millions more. It was the kind of opportunity that most pianists waited years to receive. The catch was that she had only 3 weeks to prepare. She would be performing a piano concerto by Tchaikovsky, one of the most demanding pieces in the entire repertoire. It required technical brilliance, emotional depth, and perfect coordination with the orchestra. Many pianists spent months or even years preparing for such a performance. Maya called Mr. Williams immediately. He was silent for a long moment when she told him the news. Then he said 5 words that she would never forget. He said that she was ready for this. Her mother was more cautious. She worried about the pressure and the potential for another injury. She asked Maya if she truly wanted to take this risk, or if she was just afraid of saying no to such a big opportunity. Maya thought about it carefully and answered honestly. She wanted this. She had always wanted this. And if she did not try, she would regret it for the rest of her life. The 3 weeks of preparation were the most intense of Maya's life. She worked with Mr. Williams and a piano coach from the conservatory. She studied recordings of the piece from every great pianist who had performed it. She practiced the most difficult passages until she could play them in her sleep. She coordinated with the orchestra conductor through video calls, discussing tempo and dynamics and interpretation. She also took care of herself in ways she had not done before. She stretched her hands religiously. She rested when her body told her to. She ate healthy meals and got enough sleep. She treated her mind and body as instruments that needed maintenance, not machines that could run indefinitely without care. The night before the concert, Maya stood outside the venue in New York and looked up at the lights of the city. She thought about how far she had come from that small apartment in Chicago. She thought about the broken basement piano that had started everything. She thought about all the people who had believed in her and all the obstacles she had overcome. Tomorrow, she would step onto one of the greatest stages in the world. Tomorrow, she would perform in front of thousands of strangers and millions of viewers. Tomorrow, she would show everyone what a poor girl from the wrong neighborhood could achieve with enough talent, hard work, and determination. She whispered a prayer to whatever forces might be listening. She asked for the strength to do her best. She asked for the courage to face her fears. And she asked for the wisdom to remember why she loved music in the first place, no matter what happened when the lights came up. The concert hall was magnificent beyond anything Maya had ever seen. Thousands of red velvet seats stretched back into darkness. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, like frozen stars. The stage was enormous, with room for an entire symphony orchestra and a gleaming black grand piano positioned at the front. Maya stood in the wings, waiting for her entrance. She could hear the audience murmuring and settling into their seats. She could see the orchestra warming up, dozens of musicians preparing their instruments. The conductor was reviewing his notes with calm concentration. Everything felt unreal, like a dream she might wake from at any moment. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her simple black dress. She had chosen it because it reminded her of who she was. No fancy designer gown, no expensive jewelry, just Maya. The same girl who had taught herself to play on a broken piano in a basement. The same girl who had been told she would never amount to anything. Her mother and Mr. Williams were in the audience somewhere. She could not see them through the lights, but knowing they were there gave her strength. They had supported her through everything. They had believed in her when no one else did. Whatever happened tonight, she wanted to make them proud. The stage manager approached and told her it was time. Maya took one final deep breath and walked out toward the piano. The audience fell silent as she emerged from the darkness. The spotlight found her immediately, tracking her steps as she crossed the stage. She reached the piano and turned to bow to the audience. The applause was warm but restrained. They did not know who she was yet. To them, she was just a young replacement soloist, a last-minute addition to the program. They were waiting to see if she belonged on this stage, or if she was just filling a spot that someone better had abandoned. Maya sat down and adjusted the bench. She looked at the conductor and nodded that she was ready. He raised his baton, and the orchestra fell silent. For one perfect moment, everything was completely still. Then the music began. The Tchaikovsky concerto opens with a powerful orchestral introduction. Maya sat at the piano and listened, feeling the sound wash over her. The music built in waves, each phrase adding tension and anticipation. She let herself become absorbed in the beauty of it, forgetting about the audience, the pressure, the importance of the moment. When her entrance came, she was ready. Her fingers struck the keys with authority and precision. The opening chords rang out through the hall, announcing her presence to everyone listening. This was not a quiet tune. This was a declaration of everything she had become. The first movement demanded technical brilliance. Maya delivered it with ease. Her fingers danced across the keys with speed and accuracy that years of practice had made automatic. The difficult passages that had once seemed impossible now flowed naturally. She had done this 1,000 times in the practice room. The performance was just one more time. But Maya knew that technical skill alone would not be enough. She needed to move hearts. She needed to tell a story. She needed to share the emotion that lived inside her, with everyone in that enormous room. She thought about her life as she played. She thought about the struggles and the victories, the pain and the joy. She thought about her mother working double shifts to keep them alive. She thought about Mr. Williams giving his time freely to a student who had nothing to offer but promise. She thought about the basement piano and all those lonely hours that had shaped her into who she was. All of these memories flowed through her fingers and into the music. The notes became more than just sounds. They became stories. They became feelings. They became truth expressed in a language that everyone could understand, regardless of background or education or native tongue. The audience began to respond. Maya could feel it even without seeing their faces. The quality of their silence changed. It became deeper, more focused, more engaged. They were no longer just watching a performance. They were experiencing something profound. The second movement was slower and more romantic. Maya played it with tenderness that surprised even herself. She thought about love and loss, about dreams fulfilled and dreams that remained out of reach. She thought about all the people who had touched her life, who had shaped her journey, who had helped her become the musician she was today. Somewhere in the darkness, her mother was crying. She did not need to see it to know it was true. Her mother had given everything for this moment. She had sacrificed her own dreams so that Maya could chase hers. This performance was for her, a gift of gratitude that words could never express. The third movement returned to the energetic spirit of the opening. Maya played with fire and passion, letting loose all the emotion she had held inside. Her body moved with the music, swaying and leaning, completely lost in the sound. She was not performing anymore. She was living the music. She was becoming the music. The final pages of the concerto are among the most challenging in the piano repertoire. They require tremendous stamina and concentration. Many pianists stumble here, exhausted by everything that came before. But Maya had trained for this. She had prepared her body and mind to deliver when it mattered most. She attacked the final passage with everything she had. Her fingers flew across the keys faster than seemed humanly possible. The orchestra matched her intensity, building toward a climax that shook the entire hall. The music grew louder and louder, filling every corner of the space with overwhelming sound. Then, with one final chord, it was over. The silence that followed lasted only a heartbeat. Then, the audience exploded. They leaped to their feet and applauded with a roar that seemed to shake the walls. They shouted and cheered and stamped their feet. They threw roses onto the stage. They called out her name over and over again. Maya sat at the piano in stunned disbelief. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times. but the reality was far beyond anything she had dreamed. The sound of the ovation surrounded her like an embrace. It washed away years of doubt and struggle and pain. It told her that everything had been worth it. She stood and bowed to the audience, then to the orchestra, then to the conductor. Tears streamed down her face without shame. She was not embarrassed to show her emotion. Music was emotion. That was the whole point. The applause continued for what felt like hours. The audience demanded an encore, and would not stop until she sat back down at the piano. She chose a simple piece, a nocturne by Chopin that she had learned on the basement piano when she was just a child. She played it softly and gently. A quiet moment of intimacy after the storm of the concerto. When she finally left the stage, she found her mother and Mr. Williams waiting in the wings. They pulled her into a hug that said everything words could not. They held each other and cried together. Three people whose lives had been intertwined by music and love. Later that night, after the celebrations had ended and the crowds had gone home, Maya found a moment alone. She walked out onto the empty stage and looked at the piano, sitting silent in the darkness. She placed her hand on the smooth black surface and felt its stillness beneath her fingers. She thought about all the events that had led to this moment. Every obstacle had strengthened her. Every failure had taught her. Every doubt had pushed her to prove herself. Nothing had been wasted. Everything had been necessary. She was 19 years old, standing on the stage of one of the world's greatest concert halls. She had performed with a legendary orchestra and received a standing ovation that would be talked about for years. She was no longer the poor girl from the bad neighborhood. She was Maya Chen, concert pianist, a voice that the world would hear for decades to come. But she knew that this was not the end of her story. It was just the beginning. There would be more challenges ahead, more obstacles to overcome, more moments when she would doubt herself and want to give up. The music world was hard and competitive and often cruel, yet she faced the future without fear. She had learned that she could survive anything. She had learned that talent combined with determination could break through any barrier. She had learned that the quiet tune she had been told to play could ignite not just a stage, but an entire world. She whispered a thank you to the piano, to the hall, to everyone who had ever believed in her. Then she turned and walked off the stage, stepping forward into a future bright with promise and possibility. The girl who taught herself to play on a broken instrument in a basement had become a star, and she was only just getting started.